The Karbonn Sparkle V is one of the first handsets to launch under Google's Android One program. Aimed at emerging markets, the Sparkle V, Micromax Canvas A1 and Spice Dream Uno all share the same specs and promise a stock Android OS experience. In the UK, the Sparkle V is available to buy through Amazon for £129.99 SIM-free, which puts it in the same price bracket as phones like the Nokia Lumia 635 and the first-generation Moto G. The Sparkle V isn't much of a looker, blending into the sea of uninspiring, bland, cheap Android phones. It's not a big surprise that design was low on the list of priorities, but the likes of Microsoft and Sony have shown you can make an attractive cheap phone. The backplate is removable, clipping away from the bottom of the handset to reveal the removable battery, microSD card slot and dual SIM options. The latter is something we've seen pop up in phones like the Moto G2, giving users the option to switch between SIM cards from different regions to take advantage cheaper tariffs. This should make it useful for regular travelers who don't want to get stung by big roaming charges. The microSD card slot is usually a luxury on cheap phones, so it's good to see one make an appearance on the Sparkle V. That is until you realize how much of a necessity it is to have a microSD card installed. There's just 4 GB of onboard storage, with around 2 GB that's actually usable. Content like photos and games has to be stored to an SD card. If you buy a 32 GB one, that's going to add £10 to £15 to the overall price of the phone. One thing you needn't worry about with the Sparkle V is hogging up trouser pocket space or it feeling particularly uncomfortable to use. It weighs just 107 grams and measures in at 9.2 mm thick, so it's not exactly super slim compared to something like the iPhone 5s, but for a 4.5-inch phone it's no strain reaching your fingers across the screen. Aside from that, there's nothing out of the ordinary to look out for here. The standby button and volume rocker sit on the right edge, with the micro USB charging port down the bottom and 3.5 mm headphone jack down the bottom. The single speaker sits around the back, with the 5-megapixel camera and LED flash up top. The Sparkle V features a 4.5-inch IPS LCD screen with a 480x854 resolution and 218 ppi pixel density. To put that into perspective, the similarly priced first-generation Moto G has a 4.5-inch 720p HD screen and is one of the best smartphone displays you can lay your hands on at the lower end of the smartphone chain. The Sparkle V currently runs on Android 4.4 KitKat, but Karbonn promises an upgrade to Android 5.0 Lollipop at some point in the future. One of the benefits of the Android One platform, like the Nexus phone range, is that Android One phones will be among the first in line to receive the latest over-the-air software updates. Powering the Sparkle is a quad-core MediaTek MT6582 processor clocked at 1.3 GHz with ARM's Cortex-A7, and a Mali 400MP2 GPU to take care of gaming. This is entirely the same setup that's used on the Micromax and Spice Android One handsets. This chipset is usually reserved for cheap phones and is a more cost-effective way to deliver multitasking prowess than opting for a Snapdragon CPU. The camera and display tend to be the areas where cheap phones make compromises, and the Sparkle V is no different on that front. There's a modest setup here, with a 5-megapixel main sensor, and LED flash and autofocus. Up front is a 2-megapixel sensor for selfie and video chat duty, which is a nice inclusion as it's a feature that doesn't always make the cut on low-end handsets. The Sparkle V packs a 1700 mAh battery that's removable, so you can replace it or carry around a spare. In general use, it's enough to get you through to the end of a normal working day, but if you use it intensely for things like streaming or Facebooking, it'll be more of a struggle to get you up to midnight. In more intense testing, running a 720p HD video on loop with the screen on 50%, you'll get 7 hours on average. We had similar results running the Geekbench 3 battery test as well. Compare it to something like the recently announced Honor Holly, for instance, and while you have to live without stock Android, features like the camera and display are so much better. We still say go for the 4.5-inch Moto G or the vastly improved 5-inch Moto G as your best cheap phone options. Alternatively, the Xperia M2, which also supports 4G and has more onboard storage, is also worth considering.